Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the world of the Ottoman Empire. Now let's move quietly into the early dawn of an imperial campaign. Before sunrise, a thin layer of mist settles over the Ottoman camp. The ground is marked by the tracks of wheels, hooves, and the straight lines of tightly arranged tents, forming a temporary city that relocates every day. Night fires burn low, their smoke drifting between the silent divisions of infantry, cavalry, and artillery. In these early moments, before the first command is spoken, the structure of the campaign becomes visible: order, routine, and method. The foundations of an army that shapes the map from the Balkans to Anatolia. If you enjoy calm historical storytelling, feel free to subscribe and stay with us. Before dawn, the Ottoman campaign camp stands in a stillness possible only in the narrow interval between night and the first movement of the day. The ground beneath the camp is firm from previous days of marching, marked by the impressions of wheels, hooves, and wooden stakes. Rows of tents form straight, controlled lines. Each division occupies a fixed location, preserved from day to day regardless of terrain. Infantry tents lie toward the center, cavalry units rest on the outer edges, and the artillery corps maintains a protected zone near the wagons that carry powder, tools, and spare equipment. In its arrangement, the camp resembles a temporary city, recreated each evening, identical in its internal order. The air before sunrise is dense and cool. It carries the faint smell of earth mixed with the remnants of smoke from the fires that burned through the night. Large cooking pots, clay bowls, and metal ladles stand exactly where they were left, cooled but unmoved. Nothing is shifted without purpose. This fixed order allows the camp to be broken down quickly once the morning begins. Wooden posts used during the day to tether horses serve at night as landmarks for the patrols that circle the perimeter. In the dimness they rise as dark vertical shapes against the pale ground. The outer edge of the camp is guarded by rotating watch posts. Each hour, the sentries change. Their task is constant: observe all approaches to the camp, watch the road the army has just traveled, and monitor the direction it will march next. A force of this size depends on early detection of any movement, armed groups, travelers, or animals crossing into its path. The guards carry long spears and small covered lanterns, whose light is directed downward to prevent detection from a distance. The perimeter is not formed from fortifications, but from the predictable spacing of these guards, who create a human boundary around the sleeping army. Some groups inside the camp do not sleep at all. The logistical servants responsible for transport begin their work before any other division wakes. Their duties start while the camp still lies in darkness, examining wheels, checking the condition of animal harnesses, and making sure bundles of grain and sacks of flour remain tightly fastened. They move quietly. Silence is required, because the Janissary Corps must be the first major unit to rise, and its awakening follows strict regulation. At the center of the camp stand the command tents. These are larger than the rest and contain maps, supply lists, and marching calculations. Here also are kept the imperial symbols carried with the army items that represent the authority of the Sultan during the campaign. These objects remain under guard even at night. Near the command tents are placed the wagons that hold the imperial standards, wrapped tightly to protect their colors from sun and dust. Horses kept in the night enclosure stand calmly. Their arrangement follows a fixed pattern, with each rider assigned to a specific animal and a specific location. Stable workers move between the enclosures with leather feed bags, ensuring that the animals eat before the march begins. This is done before sunrise, because the horses must be ready to move as soon as the order is given. The only sound in this part of the camp is the soft rhythm of hooves shifting on the packed earth. The infantry equipment rests neatly inside the tents or immediately outside them. The army prepares for rapid mobilization, and each soldier's belongings must be reachable within a moment. The Ottoman military is known for its ability to begin movement earlier than opposing forces, a capability developed through strict adherence to routine. No space inside the camp is used without a plan. Even in the half-light, The narrow lanes between tents are followed precisely. Nearby, the kitchen sector contains large water-filled cauldrons. The water was collected the previous evening from the nearest source. It may be used in the morning for food preparation or for the animals if conditions require. Access to water shapes the entire campaign schedule. Officers responsible for supply study upcoming routes carefully, marking every stream, river, and well on their maps. The availability of water often determines the length of each day's march. As the first pale line of light appears along the horizon, the shapes within the camp shift. Shadows soften, the outlines of tents and equipment become clearer. In this moment, the camp transitions from night to the earliest stage of day. Though movement remains minimal, soldiers inside their tents begin to wake in silence. The perimeter guards continue their slow circuit. Logistic workers finalize their inspections. Horses settle into their feed. The camp appears motionless, yet every part of it is preparing for the coordinated activity that soon follows. This is the foundation of the Ottoman marching day, a structured environment forming itself out of darkness, shaped by routine, discipline, and the needs of a large imperial army on the move. The awakening of the Janissaries begins at the moment when the first light of dawn reaches the edges of the Ottoman camp, but has not yet illuminated its full expanse. The shapes of tents grow clearer, their lines becoming visible against the pale horizon. Inside the Janissary quarters, order remains uninterrupted even through the night. Weapons rest along the interior walls, travel bundles lie arranged in uniform rows, and narrow walking spaces stay clear. When the first minutes of morning appear, the soldiers rise without spoken commands. Their internal routine is shaped by years of service, repeated marches, and a disciplined environment where each gesture is learned and practiced daily. The quiet inside the tents is broken only by the movement of fabric and the soft sound of footsteps. The Janissary Corps is structured around discipline rather than voice. There are no morning conversations, no exchanges before the day begins. Every soldier performs the same actions in the same sequence. The absence of family life within the Corps reinforces this uniformity. Personal affairs never influence the morning rhythm. The soldiers sit up, check their footwear, and turn to their weapons. These movements are slow, deliberate, and precise. Their first attention goes to the primary weapon, a bow or, in periods when firearms are already in widespread use, a matchlock gun. The bowstring or matchcord is inspected for wear. Metal components are checked for moisture. Barrels are kept clean, but a soldier runs a hand along the surface to confirm its condition. After this comes the inspection of the dagger and saber. The interior of the Janissary tent contains no unnecessary objects. Every item has a fixed place, and its position is part of the routine. When preparation is complete, the Janissaries step outside. Their tents stand in tightly ordered rows facing interior pathways, allowing each man to move through a shared corridor. These passages between tents are carefully laid out to ensure rapid exit from the camp if required. The morning air remains cool, and the folds of the soldiers' garments still hold the marks of the night. Their clothing includes a lightweight outer layer and a distinctive headpiece identifying their membership in the Corps. Soon, the officers appear. They move slowly along the lines, verifying that all soldiers have assembled and that their equipment is in proper condition. The officers do not raise their voices. Their presence signals the transition from the stillness of dawn to the first stage of activity. The Janissaries form a straight line with practiced precision. Each group knows its exact place, fixed by long-established order. The structure of the Corps does not change from one day to the next, regardless of terrain or weather. At the same time, the kitchen sector begins its work. The cooks are not yet preparing the full morning meal, but they ready the hearths where simple rations will later be warmed. The Janissaries do not eat before inspection. Their ration is modest and regulated by long-standing provisions. Food will be distributed only after the Corps takes its position within the larger organization of the camp. As the sun rises further, shadows shorten. This is the moment when the Janissary line settles into full formation. The spacing between men is consistent. Weapons create a uniform silhouette across the clearing ground. These rows represent the infantry corps upon which much of the Ottoman army depends during a campaign. Officers examine the condition of the weapons and the order of the ranks. If any item requires repair, the note is passed to logistical units responsible for maintenance. Minor issues are addressed directly inside the camp. More complex repairs go to the craftsman attached to the traveling supply train. Such repairs are infrequent, as daily inspection keeps the equipment in reliable condition. Once the inspection ends, the Janissaries move to their designated position within the camp structure. This is not their final formation for the day, but an intermediate stage before the general movement of the army begins. In certain areas, morning mist still lingers between the tent rows, but around the Janissary sector, the ground is dry and well packed, leaving little room for fog to settle. The order of their awakening is one of the elements that allows the Ottoman army to begin marching earlier than many opponents. The routine, silent rising, precise placement of equipment, and strict linear formation creates a stable structure that supports all subsequent actions of the military day. While other divisions are only beginning to stir, the Janissaries already stand assembled, fully prepared and awaiting the commands of the central staff. Their morning is not an event, but a continuation of a system that remains consistent from one camp to the next. Morning activity in the Ottoman camp becomes visible first in the kitchens. These units form one of the most structured logistical components of the army. The cooks and their assistants rise earlier than most soldiers, because the preparation of fire takes time even in the most controlled conditions. The Ottoman military relies on large iron cauldrons and portable clay ovens, and both require slow ignition using dry wood, charcoal, or dung fuel collected the previous day. Before sunrise, workers move between the hearths, placing fuel in careful layers to ensure a stable flame. The first columns of smoke rise almost vertically in the cold air, forming thin grey lines above the central part of the camp. The kitchen cause is not improvised. It is part of the Ordu Divana system, which organizes logistics, supplies, and daily provisions. Historical records from the 15th and 16th centuries describe how the Ottoman army maintained large traveling kitchens capable of feeding thousands of soldiers. Each major division, including the Janissaries, had access to its own cooking area, supervised by specialists called Aksabak, the head cook, who directed the preparation of meals. Their responsibilities included inventory checks, distribution of grain, and the maintenance of cooking equipment. Food preparation begins with measuring grain from the storage wagons. Wheat and barley are the primary staples. These grains are transported in sealed bags to protect them from moisture, and their distribution follows weight-based calculations to ensure each unit receives the correct portion. The cooks pour grain into large cauldrons of water drawn from the previous evening's supply. If the march has brought the army into a region with limited water sources, rationing is implemented immediately, and the morning meal may be reduced. When rivers or wells lie nearby, the cauldrons are filled more generously, allowing enough food for both soldiers and support personnel. As the fires strengthen, the first odors of boiled grain and baking bread begin to drift across the camp. These meals are intentionally simple, reflecting the needs of a marching army. Grain porridge is the most common morning dish, followed by flatbread made from wheat flour. Ottoman sources mention the use of yufka, a thin, durable bread that can be stored for long periods. In the mornings, fresh batches are sometimes prepared to replace older supplies. Vibrant flavors are not the purpose of these meals. Their priority is uniformity and endurance. Soldiers must eat quickly and in a manner that leaves no waste. While the cooks work, assistants clean the cauldrons and tools with sand or coarse cloth. Metal implements used for stirring and serving are inspected for cracks, because damage during a march can disrupt the entire meal cycle for a division. The orderliness of the kitchen area is essential. If the camp must move suddenly, the workers must be able to extinguish fires and load equipment onto wagons in minutes. For this reason, the layout of the cooking posts mirrors that of the larger camp: straight lines, clear pathways, and predictable positions for each part and storage basket. The smoke rising from the morning fires serves another function. It becomes a visual signal inside the camp. When the first thin plumes appear, they inform officers that the kitchens have begun operating, and thus the timeline for the day is advancing. For the soldiers waking in their tents, the scent of burning fuel indicates that preparation for the march is underway. Daily life in the Ottoman army revolves around this regular rhythm. The appearance of smoke as much a part of military order as the sound of commands. Once the porridge cooks to the proper thickness, it is distributed in wooden or metal bowls. The cooks do not deliver food individually. Soldiers come in groups to receive their portion. This reduces congestion and keeps the flow consistent. Janissaries and other elite units maintain strict order in receiving their rations, which reflects the discipline of the course. They eat standing or seated on small mats near their tents. The food is plain, but sufficient in nutrition for long-distance marches. Nearby, horse handlers prepare feed for the animals. Cavalry requires its own form of morning preparation, and barley is often allocated to the mounted units before grain reaches some infantry groups. This reflects the operational importance of the cavalry during campaigns. Horses are fed early so that they can begin movement without delay. Throughout this process, officers responsible for supplies walk through the area. They record how much grain was used, estimate remaining quantities, and calculate how many days the current stock can support the army. Ottoman campaign documents show that supply officers kept detailed notes, ensuring the army could operate 4 weeks even when local resources were unavailable. This level of organization allowed the empire to conduct long-distance campaigns across Anatolia, the Balkans, and Central Europe. By the time the sun rises fully above the horizon, the fires burn steadily, and most soldiers have eaten. The camp begins to shift from preparation to readiness. The smoke, once thin and sharp in the cold air, spreads into broader lines that drift above the tent rows. The kitchens continue operating for a short time longer, making flatbread for the march, then begin extinguishing their fires in preparation for dismantling. The morning meal marks the transition between the stillness of dawn and the movement of the day. It is an essential part of maintaining a large imperial army, and its routines: fire, grain, water, and distribution form a stable foundation for the march that follows. The inspection of weapons and armor begins soon after the morning meal, when the first direct sunlight reaches the center of the camp. This moment marks a transition from internal preparation to active readiness. In the Ottoman army, the condition of equipment is not treated as an individual responsibility alone, but as an organized, supervised process. Each division follows fixed routines to ensure that bows, firearms, sabers, shields, and protective garments meet the standards required for a day of marching and possible combat. The Janissaries, positioned near the core of the camp, begin their inspection silently. Their weapons include composite bows, early firearms such as tufek matchlock muskets, and sidearms such as kili sabers. The composite bow, made from wood, hone, and sinew, requires special attention. Soldiers run their hands along the limbs to detect changes caused by humidity, then examine the string for fraying. If the army marches in a region with morning moisture, strings may be warmed near embers before use to maintain tension, and a tested practice in Ottoman and broader Turkic archery traditions. For musketeers, the matchlock mechanism receives primary focus. The match cord must remain dry and intact. Any sign of thinning requires immediate replacement, taken from small rolls carried in pouches. Soldiers check the touch hole and barrel for blockages, ensuring the weapon can ignite powder reliably. Powder flasks, usually made of metal or treated leather, are weighed or shaken lightly so the soldier can estimate remaining powder. Ottoman military manuals from the 16th century emphasize that muskets must be kept dry and the powder measured consistently, especially during long campaigns. Sabers and daggers are inspected next. The kili, with its distinct curve and flared tip, is checked for notches along the blade. Small imperfections are sharpened with whetstones kept in personal kits. The scabbard, often made of wood covered with leather, is cleaned to prevent dust from accumulating around the hilt. Although armor was not worn constantly on marches, many soldiers carried protective elements such as mail shirts, lamella pieces, or padded garments called kozagond. These items are aired in the morning to prevent moisture buildup, especially when the campaign traverses river valleys or humid terrain. Nearby, the Sipahi cavalry performs a parallel routine. Horsemen inspect their saddles, stirrups, and girths before addressing their weapons. The cavalry arsenal includes lances, curved swords, and bows designed for mounted use. Lances are checked for straightness and splintering. Stirrup leathers receive particular attention because they wear down quickly during long journeys. The cavalry also carries small repair tools, enabling them to adjust tack without returning to the logistical units. Ottoman campaigns moving across varied terrain, mountain paths, open plains, and river crossings required this level of self-sufficiency from mounted troops. In another part of the camp, armorers attached to the army oversee larger repairs. These craftsmen travel with the supply train, carrying anvils, tongs, small forges, and collections of spare parts. Their presence is documented in campaign records describing the support corps known as sabesi, responsible for issuing and repairing military equipment. If a bow limb cracks, a musket lock jams, or armor segments loosen, soldiers bring the item to the armorer's tents. Repairs proceed according to urgency. A broken bowstring can be replaced immediately. Damage to mail or lamella armor is more time-consuming and may occupy a craftsman for several hours. Inspection also extends to shields used by some infantry units and auxiliary soldiers. These shields, often made of wood reinforced with leather and metal studs, are examined for moisture damage. The leather surface is wiped to prevent cracking. Auxiliary troops from various regions of the empire bring shields of different styles, reflecting local traditions, but all undergo the same morning inspection cycle. The officers responsible for oversight move among the units, confirming that the routine progresses without interruption. They note any shortages in supplies, such as replacement bowstrings, match cords, or arrowheads. These records guide the distribution of materials from storage wagons. Ottoman campaign accounts, including those written during the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent, mention the systematic tracking of equipment and the presence of appointed officials who monitored the army's readiness. Once inspections conclude, soldiers return their weapons to their designated positions, bows wrapped lightly in cloth, muskets placed near tent entrances, sabers attached to belts or resting in scabbards. The camp grows louder as the processes of preparation merge into the broader rhythm of the morning. Tools clink, horses snort, and armorers' hammers strike metal with measured precision. The inspection period ensures that each division begins the march with reliable equipment. The Ottoman army relies on this consistency. Whether the day brings only movement or the possibility of engagement, every soldier carries weapons that have been checked, cleaned, and prepared. This practice, repeated daily, forms part of the system that allows the imperial army to operate across vast distances, adapting to new territories while maintaining internal order. By the time the sun rises fully above the encampment, the inspection is complete. Soldiers stand ready. Weapons lie in rows or hang from belts in uniform alignment. The army transitions from preparation to assembly, its tools and armor brought to a condition suitable for whatever the campaign day may require. The preparation of the supply train begins once the inspection of weapons is complete. In the Ottoman army, the baggage train known as the orduoki is a fundamental structure that allows the army to move as a unified, self-sustaining body across large distances. Its organization follows a fixed pattern established in earlier campaigns. Grain, flour, textiles, spare weapons, tents, medical supplies, and gunpowder all have designated wagons. Every morning, before the march begins, the workers assigned to this logistical system perform a detailed sequence of tasks that ensures nothing is left unstable or improperly secured. The wagons stand in long rows at the rear and sides of the camp. Each is assigned to a specific division, and the placement does not change from day to day. This stability is essential. In the event of sudden movement or attack, soldiers must know exactly where to find the supplies distributed for their unit. Ottoman campaign accounts from the 15th and 16th centuries describe the supply train as a moving storehouse, capable of supporting tens of thousands of men for weeks at a time. Its reliability depends on the work carried out in these early morning hours. The animals that pull the wagons, oxen, mules, and sometimes camels depending on the region, are brought from their night enclosures by handlers. Each animal is paired with a wagon team. The handlers check the harnesses for signs of wear. Leather straps are inspected for cracks. Metal fittings are tested to ensure they do not loosen during movement. If a problem is found, repair tools kept in small boxes attached to the wagons are used immediately. This reduces delays later in the day. Workers responsible for grains begin by verifying the seals on the storage sacks. Wheat and barley, the primary staples of the army, are transported in tightly woven bags sealed with cord or wax. Moisture is the key threat to these supplies. If the night has been humid, the workers rotate the sacks so that damp surfaces are exposed to the air before loading. Ottoman logistical practice emphasizes the protection of grain above all else, since grain shortages can halt an entire campaign. Next to the grain wagons stand the wagons carrying gunpowder. These are placed under stricter supervision. Historical sources note that the Ottoman army maintained a designated powder corps, called humbarikler, responsible for handling explosive materials. Powder barrels are checked for cracks, and the lids are secured tightly. Workers ensure the barrels do not rub against each other, preventing accidental sparks or friction. Distance between the powder wagons and the campfires is maintained throughout the morning. In another row, textiles and tent materials are folded and tied for transport. The Ottoman tent system, large command tents, medium-sized division tents, and smaller soldier tents, requires careful packing. Canvas is rolled into bundles of equal length, tied with rope, and placed onto wagons according to size. The tent poles, usually made from wood or sometimes from reinforced materials for elite units, are tied in sets so they can be unloaded quickly at the next campsite. The speed with which the Ottoman army could establish a new camp was a noted feature of its campaigns. Medical and support supplies occupy a smaller but vital portion of the train. These wagons carry bandages, salves, herbs, and basic surgical tools used by the military physicians, known in records as Hekim or Sarah. Their preparation includes checking water containers, examining the condition of cloth used for dressings, and ensuring that knives and instruments are stored properly. Although the scale of organized military medicine in this period is limited compared to later centuries, the Ottoman army does maintain a small medical corps that travels with the main force. Officers supervise the entire process. Supply officers, sometimes referred to in documents as Nazir or Remen, walk between the wagons recording the number of sacks, barrels, and bundles loaded for the day. Their records form part of the campaign reports, used later for calculating resource consumption. The officers also verify the distribution of weights on each wagon. An uneven load can slow the march or damage animals and wheels. If redistribution is required, workers shift sacks until balance is achieved. The handlers then begin attaching the animals to the wagons. This is done slowly, often in silence, because the morning remains a critical period in maintaining order. Wagons must be ready to move in a precise sequence. Advanced supply wagons first, powder wagons in the middle, tent wagons later, and grain wagons last. The arrangement ensures that what is needed earliest in the next camp arrives first. As the sun rises higher, the supply train reaches full readiness. The wagons stand aligned, animals harnessed, drivers at their posts. The final task is inspection by the officers of the central staff. They confirm that the wagons can begin movement at the moment the march signal is given. This signal typically comes after the troops have assembled, but before the camp is fully dismantled, allowing the supply train to start moving while the soldiers prepare for departure. The organization of the supply train is one of the structural pillars of the Ottoman campaign system. Without this complex logistical routine, grain measured, powder secured, tents folded, animals harnessed, the army could not function across the diverse landscapes of the empire. Each morning, these preparations create the stable foundation on which the march depends. The discipline of the Janissary Corps becomes most visible after the supply train is prepared, and the morning routines shift toward collective formation. The Janissaries, known in Ottoman sources as the Yenicheri Okogi, follow a code of order that distinguishes them from every other division in the camp. Their internal structure is shaped by centuries of military practice, strict hierarchy, and a training system that begins in youth. By the time they stand in the morning light, their readiness reflects not only personal habits, but the institutional framework that governs their daily life. The Janissaries assemble in precise lines outside their tents. Each soldier belongs to a specific otar, company-sized unit, and each otar has its fixed place in the daily formation. Ottoman administrative records list more than 100 otars during certain periods, each with its own officers, insignia, and responsibilities. In camp, these units stand in arranged blocks, forming neat geometric patterns when viewed from a distance. The soldiers maintain equal spacing, adjusting their positions silently as the officers walk through the ranks. The officers of each otar, called Kurbok, conduct the initial inspection. They check posture, weapons, and readiness. Their authority is immediate and recognized, because the internal command structure of the Janissaries is steep and clearly defined. Beneath the Kurbok stand junior officers, such as Oda Bozi and Bakluk Bozi, who supervise smaller groups and ensure that orders travel quickly and accurately along the formation. The communication chain is efficient. Signals pass through silent gestures or brief instructions, minimizing disruption to the overall order. The uniformity of the corps is further reflected in clothing. The Janissaries wear distinctive caps and garments that indicate their unit and status. In earlier centuries, the tall felt headdress known as the biak is a defining feature. By the later classical period, variations appear, but the principle remains the same. Appearance demonstrates belonging to an institution, bound by rules, rather than personal identity. This visual cohesion contributes to the structured appearance of the morning formation. Discipline extends beyond posture and silence. The Janissaries adhere to a set of behavioral expectations enforced daily. Historical accounts describe a prohibition on personal trade, gambling, and an authorized absence from the camp. Even small violations are documented and addressed through set procedures. In the morning lineup, officers make note of any irregularities, missing equipment, signs of fatigue, or deviations from standard conduct. These observations are reported to the administrative officers of the corps, ensuring that discipline remains consistent from one day to the next. The Janissaries' internal order is supported by communal living arrangements. Unlike many other units, they do not maintain families during campaigns, and traditionally, they were not permitted to marry at all during their service. This rule changes in later centuries, but during the classical period of Ottoman campaigns, the absence of family ties reinforces the uniformity of daily routine. Living and training together eliminates variations in conduct and contributes to the shared identity of the corps. Food distribution also reflects their discipline. Although meals are simple, they are shared collectively, often prepared in cauldrons that are iconic in Janissary tradition. The large copper cauldron, kazan, holds symbolic significance. Historical narratives describe that overturning the Kazan is a dramatic act indicating rebellion. In the structured environment of the morning, the Kazan remains upright, signifying internal order and loyalty to the chain of command. The cooks assigned to each avatar distribute food evenly, and the soldiers eat without leaving formation until instructed to do otherwise. Music plays a limited but significant role in setting the rhythm of military life. The Janissaries are associated with the meta, the Ottoman military band, but the meta does not perform during ordinary morning preparations. Its music is reserved for ceremonial moments and battlefield signals. The absence of music in the morning reinforces the disciplined silence of the corps. Communication remains strictly functional. Training habits also shape their morning behavior. The Janissaries are trained in archery, firearms handling, close combat weapons, and marching drills. These skills require repetition, and the expectation is that each soldier maintains readiness daily. The morning formation thus serves as both inspection and implicit training, reinforcing posture, coordination, and discipline through practice. As officers complete their rounds, the Janissaries shift into the next stage of readiness, alignment for the march. The Owatar formations reposition themselves slightly to create lanes through which other units can pass when the army begins moving. This ability to reorganize quickly without disrupting the overall order is a hallmark of the Janissary system. Travelers and observers who witnessed Ottoman campaigns often noted the calm efficiency of the corps during transitions. By the time the sun rises high enough to illuminate the entire camp, the Janissaries stand fully prepared, their lines straight, their weapons inspected, and their movements synchronized. Their discipline sets the tone for the rest of the army. Other corps observe this central order and adjust their own routines to maintain coherence with the Janissary standard. This internal structure is one of the strengths of the Ottoman military system. The reliability of the Janissaries in daily routines, as well as in moments of conflict, allows the army to function as a coordinated whole, regardless of the terrain or distance of the campaign. The morning discipline of the Janissaries is therefore not a simple ritual, but a structural foundation for the march and the operations that follow. The preparations of the Sipahi cavalry begin shortly after the Janissaries complete their formation. The Sipahis, the timber-holding cavalry of the Ottoman Empire, form a substantial portion of the army's mounted strength. Their role in a campaign is not limited to combat. They also scout terrain, secure flanks during marching, and relay messages across distances. Their morning routine reflects these responsibilities. Movement in the cavalry area of the camp begins with activity among the horses long before the riders form their ranks. The horses are kept in night enclosures arranged in long, orderly rows. Each Sipahi is responsible for a specific horse, recorded in timber registers and campaign rolls. The animals are brought from the enclosures into open lanes, where handlers begin brushing their coats, checking hooves, and tightening saddles. Horses used by the Ottoman cavalry are often of Anatolian, Arab, or Turkmen breeding bloodlines noted for endurance, agility, and suitability for long-distance travel. Their care is structured and consistent. A cavalryman inspects the horse's legs for swelling, ensuring the animal can endure the day's march. Saddles used by the Sipahis follow designs optimized for long rides. The wooden frames are covered with padded layers and reinforced with leather. The saddle girth is checked twice, once by the handlers and once by the riders themselves. Stirrups must be aligned, and saddle cloths smoothed to avoid friction sows during extended movement. Ottoman cavalry equipment includes bags attached behind the saddle, carrying personal items, spare clothing, or basic tools. These are secured tightly, so they do not shift while riding. The Sipahis gather their weapons next. Their typical arsenal includes a curved saber, a long lance, and a composite bow. Some carry small shields made of wood and leather, designed to be lightweight for mounted combat. The lance, or mizrak, is inspected for straightness. Riders ensure the shaft is free from cracks. The bow is inspected with the same attention given by infantry archers. Sipahis often carry extra bowstrings in small pouches attached to the belt. These strings are kept dry and replaced if there is any sign of wear. A Sipahi's clothing reflects both rank and regional origin. Their garments are constructed from wool, felt, and occasionally silk, depending on status. Over these layers, many wear light armor such as padded jackets or mail shirts. Heavy armor is used selectively, as long campaigns require lighter protection. Morning rituals include tightening belts and adjusting layers for the day's weather. If the march leads into mountainous or colder regions, additional coverings may be tied behind the saddle. As preparations continue, horses begin to stand in more orderly lines. The animals shift their weight, snort softly, and stamp the earth. These sounds form a distinct chorus that marks the cavalry's awakening. The handlers guide the horses to face outward toward the camp's periphery, so that, when the signal for movement arrives, the Sipahis can mount quickly and ride into position. Officers of the Sipahi units move among the rows, checking readiness. The commanding officers, sometimes referred to as Sipahi Akask or Timur leaders, verify that horses are saddled, weapons are secured, and riders are prepared for the day's route. Their oversight ensures synchronization across dozens of cavalry divisions. In larger campaigns, Sipahis from different regions Rumelia, Anatolia, and frontier provinces may march together. Morning inspections help unify these diverse groups under a common standard. The cavalry is also responsible for scouting ahead of the main army. For this purpose, selected Sipahis form small detachments that prepare earlier than others. These riders carry light supplies, water containers, and sometimes signaling tools. Their mission is to observe the terrain, identify suitable paths, assess river crossings, and report the presence of settlements or military threats. Their departure occurs before the full army begins its march. Campaign records from the reign of Mende II and Suleiman I describe the importance of such reconnaissance detachments, noting that they often determine the speed and direction of the day's movement. The horses receive a final feeding before the march. Barley is distributed in measured quantities, reflecting both supply considerations and the need to maintain the animal's stamina. Water distribution depends on proximity to streams or wells. If the camp is located in dry terrain, handlers use buckets filled the previous evening. The cavalry cannot begin movement until water needs are met, making this one of the final steps in morning preparation. Once all tasks are completed, the Sipahis gather near their horses. Their formation begins not as a single block, but as a set of smaller groups, aligning themselves with precision. Riders check their reins one last time, place their feet in the stirrups, and mount on command. The movement is almost simultaneous. Horses lift their heads and adjust to the weight of the riders. The officers call out short instructions, guiding the groups into straight lines oriented toward the direction of march. By now, the sun has risen across the camp. The cavalry, fully assembled, occupies a long outer strip of the encampment. From a distance, the Sipahi ranks form a flowing line of horses and riders, weapons secured and banners held near the officer's position. Their readiness contributes to the overall posture of the army. While the infantry forms the core, the cavalry provides mobility, protection, and immediate response capability during the march. The Sipahis now await the signal that will begin the day's movement. Their preparation structured, methodical, and grounded in the traditions of the Ottoman military ensures that when the march starts, the cavalry moves smoothly alongside the rest of the imperial force, supporting the army's strategic reach across diverse terrain. The raising of the imperial standards marks a significant transition in the morning routine of the Ottoman camp. These banners and emblems, collectively known as Tuk, Alem, and Sankak, represent the presence and authority of the Sultan. Their placement within the camp is fixed and ceremonial. As morning preparations reach completion, officers responsible for the standards move toward the central area where these objects are stored during the night. Their work is deliberate, because the appearance of the banners signals to the entire army that the march will soon begin. The toque, a staff topped with horsehair plumes, is among the most prominent symbols. Depending on rank, the number of plumes varies. A bey might carry one, a sanjak bey two, and higher-ranking officials 3 or more. The Sultan's own toque could have several plumes and is treated with exceptional care. These objects are wrapped overnight in heavy cloth to protect them from moisture and dust. In the morning, attendants remove the coverings and inspect the wooden staff for cracks and ensure that the metal fittings remain secure. The horsehair plumes are combed lightly with the fingers to restore their shape. Next are the sankaks, the military banners used by different units. Each sankak bears distinctive colors or patterns. Some incorporate Quranic inscriptions, others display geometric motifs or symbols associated with a particular province. The sankak of the Sultan, often referred to as the Sankak-i-Zarif, is treated with special reverence. Historical Ottoman chronicles describe moments when the presence of this banner on the battlefield raised morale and unified divisions that came from distant regions of the empire. The alem, a pointed metal finial placed atop certain standards, is also part of the ceremonial structure. These finials, often crafted from brass or iron, are shaped into spearheads or crescents. They catch the morning light as the banners are raised. The officers responsible for the standards ensure that the alems are polished and securely fastened before the march begins. As the banners are unwrapped, the soldiers nearby become more alert. In the Ottoman army, the raising of standards is not accompanied by loud commands or music during standard mornings. Instead, it is a controlled process that reflects internal order. 2 or 3 attendants lift the staffs, aligning them according to rank. The placement creates a visual hierarchy. The Sultan's standard stands at the center, surrounded by the banners of elite units, followed by divisional and provincial sankaks arranged outward. The Kavo officers, responsible for transmitting commands, observe this process closely. Their formation positions them near the standards because they will guide the flow of the army once movement begins. The presence of the banners allows them to orient themselves within the camp, ensuring that signals travel in accurate directions. The banners also serve a functional role in navigation. During marches across plains, valleys, or forests, the standards remain visible above the movement of soldiers and wagons. Their height and distinctive shapes allow units to maintain alignment even when terrain becomes uneven. Ottoman campaign accounts mention that in large armies, particularly those operating during the reigns of Mehmed II or Suleiman I, standards help prevent units from drifting out of position long marches. Before the march begins, officers perform a final inspection of the standard bearers. These men, often selected for their strength and reliability, carry the banners using straps that distribute weight across the shoulders. Although the standards are not extremely heavy, carrying them for long durations requires training. The straps, wooden poles, and metal fittings are examined for signs of wear. Any loosening or splitting must be repaired immediately, as a damaged standard could cause confusion during movement. Once the banners are fully prepared, they are positioned at the head of specific formations. The Sultan's standard remains near the command tents until the moment of departure. As the morning progresses, the sun illuminates the golden or brightly colored surfaces of the standards, creating visible points across the camp. These points serve as fixed markers around which the army organizes itself. The officers of the central staff begin to gather around the banners. They discuss the day's route, confirm distances between planned stops, and verify that scouts have already departed to examine paths ahead. The presence of the standards confirms that the staff meeting concerns the march, not internal discipline or camp matters. When officers stand near the banners, the army understands that movement is imminent. The physical act of raising the standards completes the camp's transformation from rest to readiness. Infantry units near the center align themselves more tightly. Cavalry adjust positions along the outer edge. The supply train drivers prepare their animals, watching for the visual signal that accompanies the raising of the main standard. By the time the preparations end, the camp no longer appears as a temporary settlement, but as an organized body ready to move. The lines of tents have begun to fold inward. Soldiers hold their weapons at rest positions. Horses stand in orderly rows. At the center of this structure, the imperial standards rise above the camp, catching the morning light and establishing the orientation of the march. Their presence is both symbolic and practical. They represent the authority of the Sultan and the unity of the army, while also guiding the structure of the day's movement. As the banners stand fully raised, the Ottoman army prepares to transition from morning preparation to coordinated march across the terrain that lies ahead. The transition from camp to march begins shortly after the imperial standards are raised. This stage of the day is highly structured. The Ottoman army relies on a predetermined order of movement known through campaign manuals, logistical records, and eyewitness accounts from the 15th to 17th centuries. The objective is to move tens of thousands of soldiers, horses, and wagons along a single route without confusion. When the signal arrives, the camp shifts from a stationary formation into a long, coordinated column stretching across the landscape. The first to move are the advanced scouts. These riders, selected from the Sipahi cavalry and occasionally from auxiliary groups, ride ahead of the main body. Their purpose is to identify potential obstacles, marshes, steep inclines, broken bridges, or narrow passes that may slow or endanger the column. Ottoman campaign sources frequently emphasize the role of advanced scouts in preventing delays. They also watch for movement from other armies or from local populations, particularly in regions where political loyalties are uncertain. Directly behind the scouts moves the vanguard infantry, often composed of lighter units and trained skirmishers. Their task is to secure the immediate path and ensure there are no threats before the main body arrives. In some campaigns, this vanguard is supported by mounted archers who remain flexible, riding ahead when the terrain opens and falling back when narrow paths demand tighter organization. After the vanguard comes the central infantry mass. This portion of the march includes the Janissary corps, positioned near the heart of the column. Their placement reflects their role. They serve as the stable core of the army, maintaining order and discipline during the march and ready to reposition if necessary. Marching in straight lines, they keep a consistent pace. Their weapons remain accessible, bows slung across the shoulder, muskets carried in a manner that protects the ignition mechanism from dust or moisture. Flanking these infantry divisions are detachments of Sipahi cavalry. Their placement allows them to respond quickly to threats from either side. If the march crosses open plains, cavalry lines may spread wider, acting as a moving shield. In narrower terrain, they compress, riding in tighter ranks to maintain formation. The flexibility of the cavalry structure is one of the defining features of Ottoman military organization during campaigns. The supply train follows closely behind the core troops. Its position is carefully calculated. It must remain close enough to provide access to grain, water, and medical materials, yet far enough to avoid interfering with infantry pace. The wagons move in lines, each assigned to a specific division. Carts carrying gunpowder and artillery equipment occupy a central section of the train, protected by infantry escorts. Ottoman sources stress the importance of keeping powder safe from sparks and stray embers, so these wagons maintain distance from open fires used during short halts. Behind the supply train marches the artillery corps. By the 15th century, the Ottomans possess a significant number of cannons, including bronze pieces cast in central foundries. These guns require oxen, or large draft animals, for movement. Because of their weight, artillery pieces travel more slowly than infantry or cavalry. Their placement behind the supply wagons helps ensure a steady, continuous movement without halting the faster units. Crew members walk alongside the cannons, monitoring wheel strength and axle condition. Finally, the rear guard closes the column. This group includes cavalry units positioned to watch for any threat approaching from behind. The rear guard also ensures that no part of the marching column becomes separated. In uneven terrain, they help recover wagons that become stuck or assist soldiers who fall behind. Their presence maintains structural integrity across the entire length of the moving army. The process of leaving the camp is gradual. Tents begin to collapse in organized stages, starting with peripheral areas and ending with the central command tents. Workers fold canvas, tie poles, and load equipment onto designated wagons. Fires in the cooking area are extinguished completely, and ashes are covered to prevent wine from spreading embers. The Ottoman army is careful to avoid leaving anything that could start fires or indicate weakness to potential observers. Movement through the camp's boundary becomes systematic. Soldiers file through predetermined exit lanes. Horses and wagons pass in controlled sequences. Officers ensure that spacing between units remains consistent. Campaign records from the period describe this stage, one of the most disciplined aspects of the march. The transformation from a stationary settlement into a structured column requires coordinated effort across all levels of the army. Once the column is fully formed, the pace settles into a measured rhythm. Infantry walk at a steady speed. Wagons move at the rate set by their draft animals. Cavalry adjusts its tempo to match the line's progress. The standards remain visible above the center of the column, orienting units and maintaining alignment across the terrain. By the time the last wagons and rear guard leave the former campsite, the temporary city of the Ottoman army has disappeared. Only flattened grass, faint traces of ash, and parallel impressions of wheels remain. The army advances as a single, organized body, its structure preserved through routines that govern each morning of the campaign. The movement of the artillery corps begins once the marching column has taken shape and the supply train has moved into position. Ottoman artillery, known as top Q, plays a central role in the empire's campaigns. By the 15th century, the Ottomans possessed some of the most advanced siege guns in Eurasia, produced in imperial foundries at places such as Tarfane in Istanbul. These weapons require extensive preparation each morning, and their transport is one of the most carefully managed components of the march. The artillery pieces are positioned in a designated section of the column. Cannons vary in size, from smaller field guns to large bronze pieces capable of breaching city walls. Each type requires different teams of animals and handlers. Oxen are typically used for heavy guns because of their steady strength, while mules or horses may pull lighter pieces. Early in the morning, handlers examine the harnesses and wooden yokes, checking for cracks or loosened fittings. The wheels, made of reinforced wood bound with iron, are inspected to ensure they can withstand rugged terrain. Artillery crews walk beside their cannons, observing the movement of the wheels and axles. They use small tools to tighten bolts or adjust straps as needed. Ottoman campaign documents note that artillerymen carried basic repair materials with them, because a broken axle or damaged wheel could halt the entire column if not repaired quickly. In some campaigns, spare wheels are transported on separate wagons to ensure rapid replacement. Gunpowder is transported separately from the cannons. Barrels of powder are stored in wagons placed in the middle of the artillery segment at a safe distance from both open flames and moving wheels that might create sparks. Ottoman regulations emphasize strict control over powder transport. Powder barrels are sealed with strong lids and wrapped in cloth to protect them from moisture. The Humberock specialists responsible for explosive materials inspect these barrels every morning. They check for leaks, test the dryness of the powder through small samples, and ensure that the barrels remain tightly secured. Beside the powder wagons travel carts carrying cannonballs. These ammunition wagons hold stone or iron balls, depending on the type of gun in use. Stone balls are lighter and more common for large siege guns, while iron balls are used for smaller and medium-sized cannons. Each ball is placed in a padded wooden frame to prevent movement during travel. If the march crosses steep or uneven ground, crews adjust the padding to keep the ammunition stable. The artillery corps includes additional equipment, ramrods, wedges, ladles, and tools needed for loading and firing. These items are stored in wooden boxes attached to the wagons. Each box has compartments, so that tools remain in fixed positions even when the wagons shake. Crews periodically open the boxes to confirm that nothing has shifted or broken during the previous day's march. Artillery officers walk ahead of the segment, communicating with the commanders of the infantry and supply train. Their task is to ensure that the artillery maintains proper spacing. Large cannons cannot stop abruptly or accelerate quickly, so the pace of the march must match the speed of the artillery. If the infantry moves too fast, gaps develop. If the artillery slows too much, the rear of the column becomes compressed. Ottoman military organization accounts for these factors, assigning officers to coordinate movement across all segments of the column. When the march crosses rivers or creeks, the artillery segment requires special attention. Crews reinforce the sides of the wagon wheels with additional wooden blocks to prevent slipping. Soldiers build temporary ramps or fill uneven ground with branches and stones so that the heavy guns can cross safely. Accounts from campaigns in the Balkans describe situations where the army constructed makeshift bridges using felled trees to support the weight of siege guns. In mountainous terrain, the challenges increase. Heavy cannons are difficult to maneuver along narrow paths. In such cases, the army adjusts the routes based on scouting reports. If no alternative exists, crews use ropes and additional chains to stabilize the cannons. The handlers walk beside the oxen, controlling their pace carefully to avoid sudden movements that could unbalance the load. Despite these difficulties, the Ottoman artillery corps maintains a consistent rhythm. Crews know their positions and responsibilities. Every morning, they repeat the same inspection sequence: wheels, axles, ropes, gun barrels, powder, ammunition. This repetition builds reliability. By the time the march begins, each cannon is secured, each wagon properly aligned, each team of animals prepared for the day's movement. The artillery's placement within the marching column reflects its importance. Although these guns are heavy and slow, their presence is essential for sieges and for demonstrating the strength of the imperial army. Their movement through the landscape steady, deliberate, and protected forms one of the most distinctive elements of an Ottoman campaign. By late morning, when the sun rises fully over the column, the artillery moves behind the supply train in an ordered line. Oxen lean into their harnesses, the wheels turn steadily, and the crews walk beside their guns with measured steps. Their progress is slow but continuous. As the column stretches forward across fields, valleys, or distant plains, the presence of artillery at its center reinforces the structural unity of the Ottoman marching system. By midday, the Ottoman army has covered a substantial distance. The decision to halt is calculated based on terrain, the availability of water, and the pace of the slowest units, usually the artillery and the largest wagons of the supply train. When officers signal the midday stop, the long column gradually reduces its pace until each division finds a suitable area to settle temporarily. This pause, typically lasting 1 to 2 hours, is essential for maintaining the endurance of soldiers, animals, and equipment. It also preserves the structural coherence of the march. The infantry halts first. Janissaries and other foot soldiers form compact groups on terrain chosen for its flatness and shade when possible. Each company retains its internal order, avoiding dispersal. Soldiers sit or stand in rows, conserving energy while remaining attentive to commands. Their rest occurs without removing too much equipment. Weapons remain nearby, placed across laps or laid beside them on the ground. The Ottoman military places emphasis on readiness even during short breaks, ensuring the troops can assemble rapidly if needed. Cavalry units follow a similar pattern. Sepoys dismount, lead their horses to designated lines, and loosen saddles slightly so the animals can recover without removing tack entirely. Horses receive small measures of barley and water. The amount of water distributed depends on availability. When the halt occurs near a stream, handlers use buckets to fill troughs quickly. In dry regions, water drawn from barrels carried on wagons is rationed carefully. Ottoman campaign guides highlight the importance of controlled water distribution, warning that overfeeding or overwatering horses at midday could hinder their performance later. The supply train begins its own routine. Drivers guide their animals to rest in lines parallel to the infantry. Wagons remain loaded. Workers check the harnesses and wheels for signs of strain. If a leather strap has loosened or a wheel bolt has shifted, this is the moment to fix it. Crews assigned to gunpowder wagons stand guard and ensure that no fires are lit in their immediate vicinity. Even during halts, the army maintains strict safety around powder barrels. Artillery crews perform their own inspections. Oxen are allowed short periods of grazing when grass is available. During this time, the artillerymen inspect the cannon's wheels, barrels, and axles. Metal surfaces are wiped to remove dust. Wooden components are checked for cracks caused by the morning's travel. The maintenance performed during the midday halt helps prevent more serious damage during difficult terrain later in the day. The distribution of food for the midday halt follows a routine similar to the morning meal, but on a smaller scale. Grain porridge or simple flatbreads are eaten quickly. In some campaigns, especially when the army travels through fertile regions, vegetables or cheese purchased locally are added to the meal. Ottoman sources mention that officers sometimes purchase fresh foods from nearby villages when logistical conditions allowed. However, this practice depended on local markets, the attitude of the population, and the presence of allied or friendly settlements. During the halt, officers conduct brief administrative tasks. They count soldiers, verify the integrity of each unit, and check for injuries. If any soldier has fallen behind or shown signs of illness, they are directed to the medical wagons. The military physicians, Hekim and Sarah, use this time to examine wounds, apply salves, or treat fevers. Their supplies, carried in chests with organized compartments, include medicinal herbs, cloth bandages, and basic surgical tools. Although Ottoman battlefield medicine is limited compared to later centuries, the physicians provide essential care that helps maintain troop strength during long campaigns. The midday halt also provides time for reconnaissance reports to reach the central staff. Scouts return with information about the path ahead, river crossings, forested areas, open plains, or signs of enemy movement. Officers gather near the imperial standards to analyze these reports. Their discussions determine whether the march will continue along the planned route or adjust to conditions. Ottoman military strategy emphasizes adaptability. If scouts report difficult terrain or potential threats, the marching order can be adjusted before movement resumes. Resting soldiers observe these activities quietly. The army avoids noise during halts to maintain order, and to ensure that commands are heard clearly. Conversations remain limited. The only sounds across the encampment are the movement of animals, the creaking of wagons, and the low voices of officers discussing logistics. As the midday break nears its end, officers issue gradual signals for troops to prepare. Infantry stand and tighten their belts. Cavalry tighten saddles and adjust stirrups. Wagon drivers recheck harnesses. Powder wagons restore their protective coverings. Standards remain upright, indicating the center point around which the column will reform. The resumption of the march occurs in stages. Scouts depart first, followed by the vanguard infantry. Then the core troops take their positions, re-establishing the same order they held throughout the morning. The supply train aligns itself carefully, ensuring the spacing between wagons remains consistent. Artillery crews position their cannons behind the supply wagons. Finally, the rear guard forms the end of the column and signals that movement can resume. By the time the march continues, the army has regained cohesion. The midday halt, though brief, provides vital recovery and maintenance, allowing the Ottoman campaign system to function across long distances without collapse. The balance of rest, discipline, and logistical efficiency keeps the marching column steady as it moves into the afternoon portion of the day. As the army resumes its march after the midday halt, the work of the reconnaissance detachments becomes increasingly important. The Ottoman campaign system relies heavily on advanced knowledge of the terrain, and throughout the afternoon, the scouts move ahead of the main column, gathering information that will shape the remainder of the day's movement. Their task is to evaluate not only the ground, but also the availability of water, the condition of roads, and the presence of settlements or strategic obstacles. This information determines where the army will rest next, how long the march can continue, and whether adjustments in formation are necessary. The scouts are drawn primarily from the Sipahi cavalry and from irregular auxiliary forces known as a conquests. These mounted troops are familiar with riding long distances and are accustomed to reading landscapes quickly. They travel in small groups to avoid creating noise or dust trails that might reveal their presence. Each group is responsible for examining a specific part of the route. One moves along the main road, another rides along higher ground, and others explore forest edges or riverbanks. Ottoman military practice emphasizes this layered approach because it ensures that nothing escapes detection. Their assessments begin with the condition of the road. Many Ottoman campaigns pass through regions where paths are narrow or uneven. If the scouts find a section of road blocked by fallen trees, mud, or loose stones, they return to report it immediately. Infantry or auxiliary soldiers can then clear the path before the main column arrives. Campaign reports from the Balkans and Anatolia mention numerous instances in which the army encountered damaged roads that required repair before artillery and supply wagons could pass. Water sources form another critical part of the reconnaissance. The scouts locate streams, wells, and springs, estimating their capacity to supply thousands of men and animals. They note whether water is fresh, stagnant, or low due to drought. Their observations determine the length of the march for the day. If water is scarce ahead, officers may shorten the march and choose an earlier campsite. Ottoman logistical manuals emphasize that the availability of water directly shapes campaign routes, particularly during long-distance operations. Settlement patterns along the route also influence decisions. Scouts identify villages, farmsteads, and fortified structures. Their task is not to engage with these places but to observe. They check whether the buildings appear inhabited, abandoned, or fortified. Local populations can play various roles during campaigns. Some provide supplies, some avoid the army, and others watch cautiously. The scouts report signs of activity in fields, smoke from chimneys, or movement within settlements. This information helps officers decide whether to send negotiators for supplies or avoid certain areas altogether. Terrain features receive special attention. Hills, ridges, and narrow passes can affect the distribution of troops. If a steep incline lies ahead, the scouts mark its location and estimate how long it will take for the artillery to ascend. When the march passes through forested areas, they look for signs of ambush, of the presence of animals that might startle wagons and horses. In open plains, they scan for dust clouds that might indicate movement of other forces. Their observations allow the central command to prepare responses long before the main body reaches these points. The scouts also watch for natural obstacles that could slow or endanger the column. Rivers require careful mapping. They identify whether the river is shallow enough to ford or if it requires bridging. Ottoman artillery records describe how soldiers occasionally constructed temporary crossings using felled trees and packed earth. If the river proves impassable for heavy equipment, the scouts indicate alternative routes for the artillery and the supply train. All information collected by the scouts reaches the officers supervising the march. These officers gather near the imperial standards during brief pauses and compare reports. Decisions about the afternoon's movement are made based on these findings. If the scouts report favorable terrain and abundant water, the march may continue longer. If difficulties are detected, officers adjust spacing within the column to prevent delays. This adaptability is one of the structural strengths of the Ottoman army. Throughout the afternoon, the scouts maintain continuous movement. They ride ahead, return with information, and depart again. Their role is not limited to initial exploration. They monitor conditions as the column advances. If dust clouds rise to high or if the cavalry flanks detect unusual movement, the scouts investigate. Their constant vigilance allows the army to maintain order and avoid unexpected disruptions. The communication between scouts and the main column is organized. Messages pass through mounted couriers who ride directly to the officers near the standards. The couriers deliver brief reports, often containing only essential details. The officers interpret these messages and relay instructions to the infantry, cavalry, and wagons. Ottoman campaign journals describe this communication system as efficient and precise, capable of functioning even during long days of marching or unfamiliar regions. As the sun lowers in the sky, the scouts begin assessing potential locations for the evening camp. They look for flat ground, access to water, and natural features that can serve as boundaries. Their findings influence where the army will stop, how it will spread out, and how the defensive perimeter will be formed. These observations complete the final stage of the day's reconnaissance. By late afternoon, the scouts have shaped the entire structure of the march. Their evaluations of routes, water sources, settlements, and terrain ensure that the army remains coordinated and prepared. Their work provides the foundation for the transition from movement to rest, guiding the army toward a location where it can establish the next temporary camp with efficiency and order. As the afternoon progresses and the reports from the scouts accumulate, the officers of the central staff determine where the army will stop for the night. The selection of a campsite follows a set of consistent principles recorded in Ottoman campaign chronicles. The location must provide access to water, space for the full layout of the camp, and terrain that can be defended if necessary. The scouts, having surveyed the surrounding landscape, identify several possible sites. The central staff then evaluates these options and selects the most suitable one based on distance marched, supply considerations, and upcoming terrain. When the chosen site comes into view, the officers issue the signal for the army to prepare for encampment. The transition from marching column to stationary camp is one of the most complex operations of the day. The Ottoman army practices this transition regularly, and the efficiency of the process allows thousands of soldiers, horses, and wagons to settle in a controlled manner within a short period of time. The first groups to move into position are the advanced scouts and selected Sipahi detachments. They mark the boundaries of the future camp by standing at intervals along the perimeter. These boundaries form a reference for the units that follow. Next, the Janissaries and Corps infantry move into the central area of the chosen ground. They form the inner sections of the camp, maintaining the same organizational structure they held in the morning. Their placement first establishes the foundation upon which the rest of the camp will be built. Officers ensure that the spacing between the infantry tents will match the established camp pattern used throughout the campaign: straight lines, equal distances, and clear paths between each row. The supply train begins to unload its wagons in the designated area behind the infantry zone. Workers untie ropes, unload grain sacks, water containers, tent bundles, and equipment chests, placing each item precisely in its assigned location. The powder wagons remain slightly separate, positioned at a safe distance from any fires that will be lit later. Ottoman records emphasize the importance of keeping powder dry and isolated, and this practice shapes the evening layout of the camp. Artillery crews guide the heavy cannons into position near the rear of the camp. They choose flat ground to prevent the guns from shifting during the night. Once the cannons are set, The crews chock the wheels with stones or wooden blocks. Oxen are unhitched and led to water sources under the guidance of handlers. The crews then inspect the cannons again, this time checking for damage incurred during the afternoon march. Any cracks in wooden components or loosened iron bands are addressed while there is still daylight. The cavalry takes up positions along the outer boundary. Sepoys lead their horses to designated lines and loosen saddles to allow the animals to rest. Horses are brushed and given measured amounts of feed. Cavalry units remain near the perimeter because their mobility allows them to respond quickly to any unexpected event during the night. Their placement forms a flexible defensive ring around the core of the camp. As each division establishes its position, the workers assigned to tents begin assembling the structures. They unroll canvas bundles, lay out poles, and raise the tents in a consistent pattern. Command tents are erected first, forming a noticeable cluster in the center. These tents are larger and require more complex assembly. They house maps, records, and officers' belongings. Around them rise the tents of senior commanders and administrative staff. In other sections of the camp, smaller soldier tents appear in straight rows, forming the same compact city-like arrangement seen each morning. Water distribution begins soon after the camp structure takes shape. If the site is near a stream or river, soldiers fill large containers and carry them to the tent rows. Water is used for drinking, cooking, and limited washing. When water is scarce, distribution becomes rationed, and officers record the allocation to ensure the supply lasts through the evening and into the next morning. The food preparation for the evening meal starts at the same time. Cooks set up temporary hearths using stones or portable grates. They begin preparing grain porridge or simple stews using lentils or vegetables obtained earlier in the day. The evening meal is typically larger than the midday portion, intended to restore the energy lost during the march. Once the fires are lit, the scent of cooking spreads through the camp, signaling that the day's movement has ended. By now, the sun has lowered behind the horizon, and the last stages of camp organization proceed in the dim light. Officers walk through the rows, verifying that each unit has taken its assigned position, that tents stand correctly, and that equipment is placed where it can be reached quickly. The central staff gathers in the command tent to review the day's reports and plan the next route. Scouts return with final assessments of the surrounding area, noting any potential threats or notable terrain features. As darkness approaches, the camp reaches full stability. The tents form aligned grids, the cavalry stands along the perimeter, and the artillery rests in its secured positions. Fires burn in controlled areas, illuminating sections of the camp while leaving others quiet and dark. The temporary settlement of the Ottoman army, built in minutes from the marching column, now stands complete. It mirrors the same structure that existed the previous night and the night before, bound together by routines that guide every day of the campaign. When the evening camp is fully established and the initial tasks of setting up tents and tending to animals are complete, the Ottoman army transitions into its structured evening duties. These responsibilities, carried out consistently across campaigns, support the stability of the entire military system. The evening hours are not idle. They are dedicated to maintenance, administration, and strategic planning. Each segment of the army participates in this routine, ensuring that the next day's march begins from a position of organization rather than uncertainty. The first component of evening duty involves the maintenance of equipment. Infantry soldiers check their weapons again, examining the condition of bowstrings, match cords, arrows, or musket barrels. The inspection performed in the morning does not eliminate the need for another review. Dust, moisture, and general wear from the day's march can cause subtle changes that would interfere with weapon reliability. Soldiers wipe blades, adjust belts, and store weapons in accessible locations for the night. This readiness ensures that, even during evening hours, the army can respond to unexpected developments. Cavalry units follow their own maintenance sequence. Seepahis inspect saddles, stirrup leathers, and tack worn by their horses during the day. They verify that no equipment has shifted or frayed. Horses are brushed again to remove dust, and their hooves are checked for stones or debris. Ottoman cavalry treat their horses as essential components of military readiness. Records from various campaigns illustrate the consistent importance placed on equine care, as fatigue or injury to cavalry horses can impede reconnaissance or reduce mobility during the march. Artillery crews perform more substantial maintenance due to the complexity of their equipment. They check the cannon's metal surfaces for cracks or warping caused by temperature changes. Wooden wheels and axles are examined once more. If necessary, craftsmen from the armorers' corps, the Sebesi, assist in repairs. These evening checks prevent minor issues from developing into significant problems during the next day's movement. The proximity of these craftsmen to the artillery units ensures efficiency and continuity. Administrative duties occupy another part of the evening structure. Officers from each OATAR or cavalry unit gather near the command tents to record details from the day, the number of soldiers present, any injuries, the condition of equipment, and supplies consumed. Ottoman administrative culture places great value on documentation. Campaign registers, known as sefer defterleri, contain meticulous entries about logistics, troop strength, and provisioning. These records allow officers to monitor the army's condition over time and support strategic decision-making. Supply officers review the status of grain, water, and fodder. They calculate how many days' worth of supplies remain and determine whether the next day's route must pass through areas suitable for replenishment. If the scouts have identified villages or markets ahead, the supply officers discuss the possibility of obtaining additional food or materials. If the region is sparsely populated, they adjust the distribution plan to ensure that supplies last until the next opportunity for resupply. While officers handle records, the central staff convenes inside the main command tent. Maps are unrolled and secured on low wooden tables. Oil lamps provide steady but subdued light. Reports from scouts are read aloud, detailing terrain features, water sources, distances, and any signs of movement nearby. Officers analyze these observations, compare them with the information gathered earlier in the day, and decide the next segment of the route. Ottoman military planning emphasizes flexibility. If the path ahead presents obstacles or risks, alternative routes are selected. Communication between units also forms part of evening duties. Messengers carry updated instructions to infantry and cavalry officers. These instructions specify distances to be covered the next day, any changes in marching order, and the time at which morning routines will begin. The clarity of these messages helps maintain coherence across the army. The chain of communication ensures that every segment of the camp moves according to the same plan. In quieter parts of the camp, soldiers take on tasks that support hygiene and organization. Water is used sparingly for washing hands, faces, and clothing. Camps near larger rivers allow more extensive washing, while those in drier areas limit water use to essential needs. Cleanliness is significant for health during extended campaigns. Ottoman records include references to outbreaks of illness, and officers often attempt to mitigate these risks through regulated hygiene practices. Evening cooking continues as the light fades. Large cauldrons produce the main meal of the day. Soldiers gather in small groups to eat, maintaining order and avoiding disorderly movement around the camp. After eating, bowls and utensils are washed with sand or coarse cloth. The remaining embers from the fires are contained within stone circles or metal grates to prevent accidents. As darkness settles fully, the outer perimeter becomes the focus of attention. Night guards take their positions along the edges of the camp. These guards are selected from both infantry and cavalry units. Their task is to monitor the surroundings, listen for unusual sounds, and observe any movement. The boundary is also marked by the placement of torches or small lanterns at designated points. The aim is not widespread illumination, but controlled visibility. Too much light could expose the camp to observation. Inside the camp, fires are reduced and eventually extinguished except for those needed by officers or essential workers. The camp becomes quieter, sounds are limited to low conversations, the movement of animals, and the regular footsteps of patrolling guards. The last of the administrative work concludes, and officers return to their tents. The day's records are stored in protective cases. By this time, the camp has completed its transition from movement to evening stability, maintenance, planning, communication, and organization come together to ensure the next day begins with the same structure. The Ottoman army, even during rest, remains ordered and prepared. The temporary settlement that formed at sunset now stands as a fully functioning military base for the night. As night settles over the Ottoman camp, the final stage of the daily cycle begins, the establishment of the night watch and the organization of defensive routines. Even during prolonged campaigns, far from immediate conflict, the army maintains a strict system of nighttime vigilance. This practice reflects both logistical necessity and long-standing military discipline. Ottoman sources describe the night watch as a structured operation involving selected soldiers, designated patrol paths, and clear responsibilities that ensure the safety of the camp until dawn. The outer perimeter is the first line of defense. Along this boundary, chosen soldiers take their positions at regular intervals. These guards come from both infantry and cavalry units, depending on availability and the nature of the surrounding terrain. Each guard position is fixed, marked by a torch, stake, or notable feature in the landscape. Guards stand facing outward, monitoring the darkness beyond the camp. Their role is to detect movement, whether human, animal, or environmental, that might require further attention. They carry spears, bows, or matchlock muskets, depending on their unit. A structured schedule governs the rotation of these guards. The night is divided into watches, and each watch lasts a set number of hours. As one group completes its shift, the next arrives silently to replace them. This rotation ensures that no guard remains in position long enough to lose alertness. Ottoman military regulations specify penalties for guards found asleep at their posts, highlighting the seriousness with which this duty is regarded. Inside the perimeter, patrols circulate along designated paths. These patrols are composed of small groups, often with one officer and several soldiers. Their route takes them around the boundaries, through the interior lanes of tents, and near the artillery and supply wagons. Along the way, they check that fires are fully extinguished except for those approved for essential use. They also ensure that no soldiers wander outside their units or disturb the order of the camp. Patrols report irregularities directly to officers stationed near the command tents. The command tents form the central point of nighttime administration. Although most officers rest in shifts, a designated group remains awake throughout the night. This includes messengers, scribes, and officers responsible for receiving urgent reports. These individuals maintain low light levels inside the tent area, using shielded lamps to avoid attracting attention. Campaign registers, maps, and supply records remain accessible in case new information requires immediate planning. Artillery units also observe nighttime regulations. Because powder wagons and cannons pose risks, guards posted near these sections maintain strict vigilance. They monitor the area to prevent accidental ignition, theft, or tampering. Powder barrels remain sealed, and no fires are allowed in the vicinity. The artillery crews rest nearby so that they can respond quickly if needed. The cavalry remains positioned along sections of the perimeter as well. Sepoys keep their horses secured in rows behind their tents, with the animals lightly covered if the night air is cold. The cavalry's proximity to the boundaries allows for rapid reaction if a patrol identifies potential danger. Their mobility makes them essential in responding to unexpected movement outside the camp. The interior of the camp grows increasingly quiet as nighttime routines progress. soldiers lie down on mats or blankets inside their tents. Many place their weapons beside them or hang them within easy reach. The layout of tents, maintained consistently throughout the campaign, allows soldiers to orient themselves quickly even in darkness. Straight lanes between rows ensure that if an alarm is raised, units can assemble in predictable positions without confusion. In regions where wildlife poses a threat, guards monitor for animal movement as well. Accounts from campaigns in Anatolia mention nocturnal animals approaching the camp, requiring occasional intervention by patrols. When passing through forested or mountainous regions, guards listen for the sound of snapped branches or moving undergrowth. In open plains, they watch for distant silhouettes or changes in the pattern of wind across the grass. Water sources near the camp receive special attention. Guards are placed near streams or wells to ensure no one tampers with the water supply. Access to clean water is critical to the army, and protecting it during the night prevents contamination or depletion. In some instances, fences or temporary barriers are placed around water sources to control access until morning. Communication between guards and officers follows an established pattern. If a guard notices suspicious movement, he signals to the nearest patrol without shouting, often by striking a small object or using a gesture visible by torchlight. The patrol investigates and reports to the officers. This quiet communication prevents alarming the entire camp unnecessarily, while ensuring information reaches those who need it. As the night progresses, the camp settles into a steady rhythm. The perimeter remains under constant observation. Patrols continue their circuits at measured intervals. Officers maintain their stations near the command tents. The Empire's temporary city stands in ordered stillness, its structures aligned, its routines preserved. By the final watch of the night, the camp has completed its cycle of preparation, movement, and rest. The army remains secure behind its organized defenses. The silence, interrupted only by the movement of guards and the distant sounds of animals, represents not a lack of activity, but the steady functioning of a disciplined military system. When dawn approaches, the light will reveal a camp ready to begin the cycle again. Weapons checked, horses tended, banners raised, and the marching column assembled for another day of movement across the landscape. The daily cycle of an Ottoman campaign reflects a military system built on routine, discipline, and controlled movement across large distances. Each stage of the day, from the silent order of the pre-dawn camp to the structured vigilance of the night watch, demonstrates how the army sustains cohesion while traveling through varied terrain. Its operational strength lies not in exceptional moments, but in the repetition of tasks that maintain readiness. The morning inspection of weapons, the organization of the supply train, the movement of artillery, and the measured pace of infantry and cavalry along the marching route. The internal hierarchy of the Janissaries and the mobility of the Sipahi cavalry provide complementary roles within the column. The Janissaries anchor the center with consistent discipline, while the cavalry extends the army's reach, scouts the terrain, and secures the flanks. The artillery corps, despite the burden of heavy equipment, contributes the capability essential for sieges and fortified encounters. Each component functions within a system that balances speed with stability. Logistical preparation remains central to the campaign's success. Grain, water, fodder, and powder are measured, protected, and distributed according to established procedures. The selection of campsites follows clear criteria, ensuring that the army maintains access to resources and defensible positions. Evening routines further reinforce the structure of the army, as maintenance, record-keeping, and planning prepare the force for the next day's march. Security completes the cycle. The night watch forms a protective ring around the temporary city created each evening, relying on rotation, patrols, and controlled illumination. This system preserves order even during rest. Across these repeated patterns, a single principle defines the Ottoman campaign: sustained organization. Through consistent daily routines, the army remains capable of moving across continents while maintaining the structural integrity, if necessary, for military operations. Thank you for joining us on this quiet look inside a single day of an Ottoman campaign. If you appreciate calm, structured historical storytelling, feel free to subscribe and stay with us for future journeys through the past. Good night.